Share here in a second.
Okay.
Okay, welcome everybody to the complement increase portion of this today. My name is Kim Maddox and I'm from Augusta University. And I'm from a fairly small program. Right now we're at 13 residents, but we will have our full complement increase as of next year to 15. And I'll explain later the difference in numbers.
And I'm Denise Massell from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. We have 15 residents in our program, but just received a permanent complement increase. And so after 5 years' time, we will have 20 residents total.
Hi, I'm Nicole Neimann from the University of Vermont Medical Center. We have a small program of 5 residents, 1 each year. I'm gonna start things off. Now, we're gonna just kind of run through step by step what each of us has done at our program to do a complement request or a complement increase request. And we're gonna make sure these slides are available to you so you don't have to take extensive notes. And our email addresses will be available at the end of the presentation. So if you have specific questions, you can get in touch with us or ask. So really before you start any official steps within your institution or with the ACGME, you really have got to have had a lot of extensive conversations within your program. You've got to have discussed all the pros and cons with your residents, your faculty, your program director, program administrator or coordinator. Just hash out all of the pros and cons. So once everybody is finally agreed, like, yeah, we definitely want to move forward, then you need to start initiating formal steps. So step number 1, usually your institution needs to approve a complement increase first prior to applying to the ACGME. So here's a beautiful picture of the University of Vermont Medical Center. Clearly, this is not February. We are covered in about 7 inches of snow right now. So we really had to initiate the first steps within our hospital before we went to ACGME. Next slide.
Okay. Bear with me, everyone. Again, I'm not sure why this is not. All right, there we go.
Okay, so you really need to figure out your timeline. And there are so many different steps, so many different committees that you have to sit before and get approved by. You really need to figure out, when does the ACGME Urology Review Committee meet? They only meet 3 times a year. And you need to figure out when you think you're going to submit your request to them. So you have to figure out when they meet and work backwards. So they meet 3 times a year. The agenda closing date is usually 2 months prior to the meeting date. So you have to submit your request online through the ACGME website in time to get on their agenda. So here are the dates for 2023. They meet April, August, and then January of next year. It's not very often. And then you can see the agenda closing date is 2 months prior. Next slide. Where do I find the RC meeting dates? How do I find this information? This is public information. This is available on the ACGME website. You go to specialties, click on urology, and then on the page, the general urology page, you can kind of see in the lower right-hand corner where it says contact us, and then you have to scroll on down, and then you will find the RC meeting dates. So what steps do I need to take within my institution to increase our complement? You really always need to start with asking your DIO or GME office, what is the process? How do we go about requesting a complement increase? Because there are budgetary implications, they almost always want you to do some kind of official process to request a complement increase. So some of the questions they're going to want you to consider are, is our institution already over our cap? At University of Vermont, we are definitely over our cap by about 100 trainees. So who's going to fund the complement increase? Who's going to fund their salaries, their benefits? Other things to consider are, do we need additional staffing to manage the program? Your program coordinator or program administrator, FTE. Right now, I'm only a 0.5 FTE in urology. I manage 2 other programs. And then also, do you need more equipment? Do you need more space? What are all the various needs if you're going to increase your complement? Next slide. As I said, if there's a budgetary impact, there is almost always an official process to request more money. So our GME director told me we had to complete a business plan. This was an official template that our institution had created, and it was very extensive, meaning I had to do most of the work, of course, with some input from my program director. It included like digging out demographic data for Vermont, demographic data for New England, how many urologists, what's the average retirement age, you know, the workforce, population, demographics, all kinds of stuff. And, you know, of course it asked, you know, budgetary information. It asked about our match rate. This was extensive and took me months to put together. And of course, once we completed the budget plan, we had to run it first by the GMAC committee. And of course, once it was approved by GMAC, then we had to run it by our hospital finance committee. So once again, this all equals adding on more time to your timeline. In our instance, our finance committee meets every other month. So you really have to factor all of these various people that have to approve your complement increase into your timeline. Next slide. Here's our timeline at the University of Vermont. You can see at the very beginning, we started this process in April of 2021. We asked our DIO for a complement increase. This was, of course, we had already been talking about it with her for months, and we already knew that she was like, yeah, you guys should go for this. This is very appropriate. We have lots of reasons why you should be approved. So we asked her in April 2021. They gave us the blank template for the UVM Medical Center business plan. It took us several months to complete. We finally completed it in November of that year. We submitted it to our GME office and got on the agenda for our November GMAC meeting, at which time it was approved. Once it was approved by GMAC, we had to submit it to the UVM Medical Center Finance Committee, and you can see that in December 2021, it was approved. And then once we had jumped all those hurdles, I logged on to the ACGME website, and a little later in our presentation, Kim or Denise are going to show you exactly where you apply. But I logged in. There are several steps that you have to do on the ACGME website. You know, you log into ads and you submit your complement increase online to ACGME. And the first person it goes to is your DIO. And our DIO approved it right away. And then it moves forward to go to your to the urology RC committee. So you can see that in late January, our DIO approved the formal request in ads. And so we had certainly made it in time to submit our request by the beginning of February 2022 in order to get onto the April RC meeting agenda. Now, I should tell you, we are a small program. We had already in 2019 requested a temporary complement increase, we took on two residents from Saudi Arabia who were training at McGill in Montreal, Canada. And there was a whole political impasse between Saudi and Canada. And at one point, they were going to, Canada was asking all Saudi trainees to leave Canada. And people were scrambling and like, oh my gosh. And that's how we ended up with two Saudi trainees who transferred into our program. So we'd already had success with a temporary complement increase. And so much success that we're like, yeah, let's apply for a permanent complement increase. So we had applied to go from 5 residents to 10. We wanted to double our complement increase. You can see on this timeline that shortly after the meeting, the RC meeting, that they sent us a pleasant email that said, your request is denied. And we're like, Calgon, take me away. And when they send you this email, they give you a quick down and dirty, either you're approved or you're denied. And then they say, you will receive a formal letter from us within 60 days detailing why we denied your request. So we had to sit on that information because we didn't really know why they declined our request. But ultimately, it turns out that they declined our request because we did not show sufficient case volume to support doubling our number of residents. So that's the down and dirty, but you can see it really was a year-long process. And it did take a lot of time to gather all the data. That was the most time consuming. So I'm going to turn it over to Kim.
And before Kim starts, I want to say this is something we've been talking about, my program director and I, a lot, because what we find happens with our residents and their case logs is they have minimums. And once they know they're going to meet those minimums, they don't log their cases. They don't care. It doesn't matter to them. They're going to graduate. And so this is something that, you've got to think about on the front end of it is finding a way. And that's what we're actually just talking about this morning, is what we can do to encourage our residents to accurately and fully log their cases, because that is the person's going to be hurt by them not doing it. Is not them, it's us. We will not be able to get a complement increase without that case log volume to support it.
And we're going to talk more extensively about that as we go on, but you're absolutely right, Stephanie. That's really critical to impress upon your residents to continue logging even after they hit their minimums.
Right.
And I think if you're transparent with them, and provide rationale, residents are hopefully more likely to comply with requests.
Okay, so I was just going to move along to my timeline briefly. So we had a faculty retreat in September, and we got approval from our own faculty about the proposed rotation schedules and how it will affect the program, and everybody agreed on the rotation schedules and agreed to add additional residents. Same thing around January, we asked the DIO for approval, and he sent blank templates to work off of, requesting the same information as Nicole mentioned, demographics, budgets, and all that jazz. So we had until September. We submitted our business plan in September, and a couple weeks after that, the GMAC met and they approved it. And then it went to the RRC. Immediately after that, we went into ADS and put it in for the approval for the increase. And it was approved mid-January for additional. We have 2 residents at the time, and we wanted just an additional slot to have 3 a year, and that was beginning in 2020. So in the 2020 match, we were able to match 3 PGY1s and an additional PGY2 slot that we did go back and request an additional PGY2 to help with the the load at the time. It was during COVID. And so we were able to get that done without having to go through the RRC, just through our GMAC, our GME office. And I can go into detail about that later as well. Next slide.
All right. Well, it's been a year since we first approached our DIO and met with the Urology Review Committee to discuss the possibility of increasing our program size. It wasn't really until the summer of 2022 that we approached the GME office at our institution to start the formal request process. We quickly sought institutional procedure numbers from our sponsoring institution, a community hospital where our residents rotate, and the VA where they rotate. And we created slides for our GMAC presentation in September and completed the detailed workforce planning request force that we had to complete at our institution. Immediately after receiving approval from GMAC and our workforce planning committee, we submitted our permanent increase request and ads. The RC suggested that we also submit a temporary increase request, as the RC did not meet until after the AUA rink deadline. In an interesting twist of fate, the RC chose not to review our temporary increase request prior to their January meeting. And so we were only able to put our original 3 vacancies in the match and put our match list in on December 10th. And then on January 19th, we received an email from the RC that our permanent complement increase was approved. And both the RC and the AUA confirmed via email to us that we could offer the position to an unmatched applicant on match day, which we did, and filled our 4th position really about 15 to 20 minutes after we received our match results. All right, so we're going to discuss the difference between a permanent and a temporary increase. But be aware that there is an informative document on the urology section of the ACGME website that includes all of this information. I would say if you are looking to get an increase, to go onto the website, at the ACGME website, and look for this document. It's super detailed and very, very helpful. For a permanent increase, your program must first have approval of GMAC and hold continued accreditation status. As Nicole pointed out, you must also ensure any additional institutional approval before submitting the request and ads. It can't be overstated that having a sound educational rationale and sufficient institutional case and procedure numbers that are available to you is crucial to your request success. Remember, your need for more residents is in response to your robust educational opportunities rather than the need to increase your workforce. You'll want to be sure that ADS is up to date, as a review committee will look at data such as citations, major changes, and faculty to resident ratio. Of note, your graduate case log reports cannot be updated, but you can provide an explanation in the educational rationale if minimums were not met in the previous year's report. All right, a temporary complement increase can be reviewed by the RC outside of their formal meetings. An increase for only a month does not need approval. Any temporary increase request above that will need DIO approval and the documentation we just discussed. For urology programs, this includes a temporary increase in the approved complement for a training year, even if the program will not exceed its total approved complement. We will talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes. So once you have GMAC and institutional approval, you will initiate your permanent increase request and ads. The DIO will have to approve your request electronically, or they can choose to request more information or deny it. Once it's been approved by the DIO, you will have access to the institutional procedural volume template and block diagram template, which Kim will discuss in detail. There is a free text area to provide your educational rationale and any other major changes to the training program. And I would make sure that you have that educational rationale ready and polished and ready to go so that you can just copy and paste it into ADS. So this is just so that you can see once you're logged into ADS, this is where you would go to initiate the complement change. And this just shows you what you will receive once you initiate that request. And then when the DIO and GME approved it, and then what their comments were, and that you can see up here that it's under RC review. So the RC reviewed that. So like I had said earlier, the RC had told us to also do the temporary, and you can see that never got pushed forward. So basically all that got pushed forward was our permanent increase, which was then under review as of whatever the date was on here. Applying for a temporary increase is essentially the same, though your block diagram may not change. And that is information you should provide in your educational rationale. So if your block diagram looks exactly the same as it would when you upload it for your annual ads review, you would just make a note of that in your educational rationale when you apply for your temporary increase. Okay, so there is a lot of text on this slide, but this includes a direct quote from the Urology RC Accreditation Administrator. It's important that your resident roster in ADS aligns with your approved number of residents at each level. If not, you will have to initiate a temporary complement increase request. If you have a resident who does not promote to the next PGY level, you must apply for a temporary complement increase, even if you aren't over your total complement. If you are voluntarily decreasing your resident complement, you would make that request after the effective date of the decrease has passed. And lastly, I will leave you with a few pearls of wisdom. We found it incredibly helpful to meet virtually with the RC chair, the executive director and administrator. And that was last February in 2022, who answered our questions and made us believe that we were ready to request a complement increase. We can't state enough how important it is to work with your department and institution leaders well in advance of making a request. And remember to keep in mind the important dates such as the RC agenda closing date, the RC meeting date, and any institutional deadlines that you might have.
Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit into what they require as far as block diagrams and caseloads. Before I do that, I'll just briefly go over this slide. So in addition to matching the 3 residents for the PGY year starting in 2020, we also want to take a PGY2 level to approve the workload during this stressful year. And that increase was permitted by the RRC as we were approved already for 3 a year as of January 2019. Because that approval came before the match happened, we only matched 2 that year, and we would continue to match the 3 that we got the complement increase for in 2020. Because we did not take the extra 3 in 2019, we were able to request permission from the GMAC to fill that PGY2 position rather than waiting until 2021. That's how we were able to do that, because we did not take that extra resident in 2019. Next slide. So this is just an example of what we had to submit to them. It asked for your chief residents for the past 6 years, a sample of each procedure, and it wants you to show that if you added another resident, would they meet the minimums of 200 each resident, not all 3 of them. So if you can just see in 2017, Dr. McCraw and Dr. Chin, both, they had 724 between the 2 of them. and we are only required to have 200. So that was about, if you can see here, it breaks it down. They want to know, if this third resident would have enough case volume to justify that, basically. They want you to go back 6 years to provide this information. So that's what we had to do, and it takes a lot of time, as you can see, going through all of their case logs and providing the numbers. In the last, I would say the last couple of years, we did have it. So that helped us a lot. Next slide. And then they want you to break it down between each participating site. You can get this information. At our institution, we have a coding manager. She can easily pull the database out of how many procedures we did at MCG under each different category. And then at the VA, they also have someone over there. And your program director or your chair will know how to get this information, because if they stay up to date on their, well, most of them should know how. If they stay up to date on their how much money they're making and all their FTEs, and then they have this readily available to them anyway. They should be able to get this. This piece of information was not hard to get for us anyway. Next slide. So then you had to show the next 5 years, a transition year, how you're going to transition these new residents each year into your program and not interrupt the other residents' training, making sure that each resident still has the ability to work with each resident and nobody's rotations were going to be messed up in any kind of way, or we were going to not be compliant in any kind of way. So as you can see, this was the very first transition year that we took. We only had the two PGY2s. So this would, on the side, you can see where we took the extra resident and we didn't have that one PGY2 that year. So we actually had a slot there, but we didn't take it that year because we were so close to the match when we got approved. Next slide. So transition year number 2, this starts in 2020, 2021, 2022 year, where we are finally up to the 3 PGY1s, 3 PGY2s, and so forth. We're still at the 2 down here. We haven't gotten that far. Transition year number 3, it shows, it goes on out to, now we're up to 3 slots for up to the PGY3 year, and then so on for the transition year number 5, 4, and 5. So now we're in transition number 4, actually. Next year, we will be up to our full complement increase of 3 in each PGY year. Now, these rotation schedules that we did give them, of course, they're going to change year to year. We're going to meet every year. We're going to see, how do these rotations work out for you? What do we need to change? Do we need to add or delete anything? Do we need to shorten them here, shorten them there? All they want to see is that you can easily transition this resident into the next 5 years without hindering another resident's education. Next slide. I think that was all the slides I had as far as what documentation took the longest on our part. As you can see, it's a lot of information you have to give them. So it does take a while to produce all of this. And your program director should be doing most of this, but I did have to step in and do a lot of it. So it is important that you know what you have to get and what you have to do ahead of time. But we're here for questions if anybody has any.
Boy, I'm looking forward to this. We're in the process right now of just having meetings with our DIO and our, institution as far as, the complement increase. And everybody's like, yeah. But of course, one of the main issues is they don't want it to look like we're just trying to get more labor. So I can see that this is going to be quite a process to have to pull together all this documentation. And I'm sure the case logs are going to be a lot of, that, being able to justify that the new person will be able to have enough of an educational experience and enough case logs to make it worth their while. So thank you for giving me the big picture, so to speak. I'll be prepared.
It's interesting because, you want when you're presenting to your GMAC and to the RC for it to be just a super strong educational rationale. But if you do have to do some sort of presentation or worksheet for workforce planning, it's a lot different because all they care really about is the financial aspects of it. So you have to be able to spin in many different directions.
We were able to convey by having more residents, it was going to provide plenty of educational opportunities, specifically related to, we were going to have enough people to allow for more research rotations. So that would contribute to increased scholarly activity. Mm-hmm. And it would improve resident wellness. And, obviously we were able to kind of throw in some, didactics and educational experiences. And we were going to have to add extra sites, and we couldn't adequately display how the additional sites over the upcoming 5 years were going to contribute adequate case numbers. So you're absolutely right. What Denise said is you have to present the educational opportunities and also somehow spin in your data.
I wanted to answer the question from Kim Hall. Once you submit that 5-year transition block schedule and you're approved for that complement increase, you do not have to resubmit that block schedule if you make changes that year. You would it's just all part of your yearly ADS update, and you would just submit your yearly block schedule that you're going to be working off that year. The initial 5-year block schedule that I sent y'all, or that I just went over, is just to get the approval.
And one of the things I mentioned, and I think the one date passed, but I believe there's another one coming up, though I think we have passed the deadline, is when the SAU sends out that message asking if you want like a 10-minute virtual session with the RC. That was invaluable. And we basically met with them and asked them the questions. And prior to the meeting, they had looked at our case log data and were like, you guys look like you're in pretty good shape. One of the things Dr. Wallen said to us was, things that they're looking for is, opportunities that will provide practice readiness for residents. So I kind of took the buzzwords that were supplied to us in that meeting and used those as part of our educational rationale.
I agree with Denise. We just had that meeting with our RC this morning, and it was a 10-minute wealth of information. And he said, you guys are in good shape. You have no citations, no AFIs. I don't think there would be an issue with a complement increase. So that meeting is very, very important. I can't stress enough.
And one of the things that Krista said in her talk about the ACGME staff being there for us is so true. I mean, they couldn't have been better. We emailed them immediately after we got the message from them that we were approved. And I'm pretty sure they were probably at the SAU meeting. They responded immediately. Shelley Bargett responded to us immediately. Same with the AUA. We had reached out to Sandra Howard to ask about how you would go about picking up a position outside of the match. All of them were awesome, and they were very, very willing to answer our questions.
And I want to respond to Michelle's question. Can you go back to the case, one of the case log slides, Denise?
Mhm.
Question is part of the process tracking how many additional cases are that one? How many cases are going without resident attention, or is it the volume of cases the residents are doing? So if you look, this is a template provided by the ACGME.
Mhm.
They ask you at the top, it says enter the total number of procedures for the most recent academic year at each participating site. So you're doing all cases. And then at the bottom, percent of patients available for resident education. So that number should be filled out. And so depending on the site, at my institution, at our primary site, 100% of cases were involved residents. And then at our secondary site, it was only 80%. So they're able to see that. And then they also, the RC committee is looking at your case, your residents' case logs in real time and seeing what they've logged. So they're looking at the data you provide on this spreadsheet, and they're looking at case logs. Did that answer your question, Michelle? Okay, cool.
And I don't know how to get your residents to keep logging. Mine seem to have a internal competition with each other who can get the most cases. So we don't really have that problem, which we really do. Our program director does put a lot of emphasis on, keep logging your cases, even if you've met your minimum, keep logging. That's how we get more help here. That's how we get complement increases. If y'all want another resident in a couple of years, we want to expand this program. If y'all want more help, you need to log your cases, keep logging. We stay on them. And that's just, I guess that's what you have to do. I don't have a magic way to make them continue to log their cases.
It's really helpful to also tell them or remind them, like there is a relatively new phone app that they can download on their smartphone and log their cases right there in their little hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're thinking about giving them admin time, like twice a month, an hour or something like that, and telling them it's for logging your cases and completing your evaluations.
That's a good idea.
And just structured time that's what it's for. And hopefully that, because ours don't have any competition. I guess they don't care. We only had one resident several years ago. If you looked at his case logs, it made it look like no one else was doing anything because his were so much higher. I'm actually surprised we didn't get flagged by the ACGME, by the RRC over it, because whatever he did made it look like he was working twice as much as anybody else. But since him, they just get to their minimums and, you can tell they just stop logging. And
we do have some like that. I mean, we do have some like that. And when they meet in their meeting with the program director with their, semi-annual meeting or whatever, and they go over their case logs and stuff, if they see that, they're behind or their numbers aren't matching the others, he'll really get on to them and he'll say, I need to see some of these cases logged. I know you have more. And he'll check back with them within the month and make sure that he's getting them on there.
So I had I overheard a conversation with the residents. Because every month I would go in and look to see where they are all at. Have they been logging their cases? Go to the reports and sort of screenshot it and send it to the PD. And so their trick is that they logged cases on January 3rd, and the last case date was January 3rd. But they didn't log anything like from October to December 31st.
Yep.
So you're only looking at the report. And, I'm like, all right, because we had a little chat with him, like, in September, you need to really get caught up and blah, blah. I have one problem child. And so I went back in just because I overheard that conversation. Yeah, I went and I did all 4 years of his stuff to see what he was missing. How many months were missing in between. So it's not just looking at that final page of the report. It's like really going in and making sure that they're logging every day or every rotation. They know how to pull the wool over their eyes.
Yeah, there's a report in there. You can see when's the last time they logged.
Right.
Very helpful. Well, does anybody else have any more questions about this? And we can certainly, this will be in the Google Docs as well, if you need to go back to it.
Okay, well, if nobody else has anything, I'm going to stop this recording again.